The 20th of April 1945. Fires were raging in Berlin. As buildings were pulverized by Soviet artillery and tanks, families hid in terror, awaiting the final onslaught of the Red Army. Hitler's 1,000-year Reich had lasted barely 12 years. He had failed to deliver his promised land, and now his people were paying the ultimate price in blood and destruction. As the devastation raged overhead, deep below ground inside the steel and concrete Führer bunker, a bizarre ritual was being played out. Hitler's birthday party. Some of his closest Nazi comrades had come to congratulate their Führer. "15 meters beneath the gardens of the Reich Chancellery, Hitler sat in his cramped quarters eating cake. Eva Braun, his mistress for the past 12 years, was with him. Hitler was 56 years old. He had been leader of his country since 1933. However, many of the top Nazis visiting him had been his close friends for over 20 years, since the Nazi Party's earliest days. Joseph Goebbels was head of the Nazi propaganda machine. He joined the National Socialist Party in 1922. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, had stood by Hitler in his failed beer hall putsch of 1923. Hermann Goering, flamboyant commander of the Luftwaffe, had also been at the failed Nazi rebellion. An injury sustained there had led to his morphine addiction. Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary, had committed murder for the Nazi Party in 1923 and had been sentenced to 10 years. But there was one old comrade missing from this bizarre birthday gathering. One man who most certainly would have been with him in the bunker in these last days of the Third Reich. And behind this notable absence lay one of Hitler's most notorious acts of treachery. On the morning of the 1st of July 1934, Hitler had been in power for 18 months as Chancellor of Germany. But he was a man in turmoil. Normally decisive, he could not bring himself to issue one particular death warrant. But by midday, Hermann Goering and Heinrich Himmler had persuaded him to sign the order. Late that afternoon, Theodor Eicke, commander of the Dachau concentration camp, arrived at Stadelheim prison in Munich with 2 SS officers. They demanded to visit the prisoner in cell 474. The prison governor would not comply and telephoned the Minister of Justice. Eicke grabbed the phone, shouting that he had a direct order from the Führer. He was then allowed into the cell. He found a fat man stripped to the waist. "Your life is over," said Eicke. He left the cell and waited outside. The imprisoned man was an incredulous Ernst Röhm, one of the Führer's best friends. He'd supported Hitler during the failed beer hall putsch of 1923. When Hitler seemed set for political power in 1930, he had turned to Röhm to organize his brown shirt troops. The two men could not have been closer. Hearing no sound inside the cell, Eicher opened the door and entered with an SS officer. 3 shots then rang out, and Röhm slumped to the ground. "My Führer," he gasped. "My Führer." Röhm was dead, killed on the orders of his best friend. Why did Hitler betray one of his closest supporters? Ernst Röhm was born in Munich, Bavaria in November 1887. Commissioned just prior to 1914, he served in the German army during the First World War. He was a natural soldier and enjoyed the camaraderie of the trenches. In the thick of the action at the front, he took many risks. Wounded several times, Röhm was permanently scarred by a gunshot to the face. After 1918, he failed to settle in peacetime. Like other disillusioned veterans of the war, he was sympathetic towards the nationalist armed groups called Freikorps. In the wake of defeat, hunger and chaos consumed Germany as the economy collapsed. Nationalists and communists marched through the streets, fighting for control of German cities. Röhm remained in the army, serving as a captain. He began to store weapons at a secret location near Munich. In 1919, he gave his support to Franz Ritter von Epp, fighting against Munich's left-wing government. It was valuable revolutionary experience for Röhm. Meanwhile, another ex-soldier, Adolf Hitler, had joined a seemingly insignificant anti-government group, set up by disillusioned nationalists. From the outset, the Nazi Party took on the style of a military organization. Its supporters wore uniforms and were ready to defend its policies with brute force. Röhm was immediately drawn to the revolutionary politics of the Nazis, and soon became one of Hitler's earliest supporters. It was the start of a friendship that was to wreak havoc in the years to come. Berlin, 1921. Adolf Hitler took control of the Nazi Party and enlisted the services of a young but ruthless supporter, Ernst Röhm. Later that year, Hitler created a militia to break up opposing political meetings with extreme violence. They were called the Brown Shirts. He called them his Sturmabteilung, SA for short. It meant Storm Detachment, and was derived from the elite troops that had stormed trenches in the First World War. War veterans were among the SA's first recruits. They were soon busy fighting communists and intimidating minorities, with Ernst Röhm on the front line. Röhm relished his new sense of power and dreamed of transforming the SA into a revolutionary juggernaut. But in 1923, Hitler recruited another, smaller group of black-shirted soldiers, utterly faithful to him, to serve as his personal bodyguard. These were called the Schutz. convinced Hitler that he could only take power by legal means. Röhm, however, still believed in revolution. For the first time, political ideology began to drive them apart. Disillusioned by the lack of action in Germany, Röhm gave up politics and worked as a traveling salesman before taking a job in a factory. Later, he decided to leave Germany altogether. He went to work as a military instructor in Bolivia, isolated from the dramatic events unfolding in Germany. Whilst Röhm worked abroad, Hitler was busy forging a conventional political career, winning over voters with his powerful oratory. Audiences were thrilled by his masterful speeches, in which he catalogued Germany's enemies, including, of course, the Jews. Only the Nazi Party, he claimed, could save Germany from chaos and mediocrity. From Bolivia, and Hitler once again put him in charge of the SA, now a massive political force. For Röhm, it was a dream come true. The position brought him power and status. Röhm organized the SA along strict military lines, dividing it into 5 Obergruppen and 18 Gruppen. A training college was set up for new recruits in Munich. The brown shirts were to take command of the streets, preventing any other political party, especially the communists, from taking power through violence. The army at this time was professional but small, drastically reduced in size and power by the post-war Treaty of Versailles. Röhm and his followers believed they could create a new, more effective military force. But to avoid criticism, they had to operate merely as an auxiliary arm of the Nazi Party. Meanwhile, the smaller SS, under the command of Heinrich Himmler, remained subordinate to Röhm and the SA. But Himmler had his own ambitions to transform the SS into a major power in Nazi Germany. At the same time, he organized his own secret police force to viciously attack political opponents. Alarmed by the violent action of the SA, the government banned political parties from wearing uniforms. Hitler had to comply. and the SA's brown shirts were temporarily replaced with white. But there was further trouble ahead. Amid the artistic and sexual freedom of the 1920s, homosexuals had been increasingly open. The brown shirts were accused of leading scandalous sex lives. Röhm himself was a homosexual and appointed many gay officers to high ranks within the SA. Initially, Hitler ignored the problem, declaring that the SA was not a moral institution for grooming young ladies, but a club for fighters. In 1932, the Nazis became the largest political party in Germany. Hitler's combination of politics and violence was succeeding. But would the scandal surrounding the brown shirts derail his quest for domination? And would he have to sacrifice them to gain the support of Germany's much-respected president, the great war leader Hindenburg? January the 30th, 1933. Hitler finally became Chancellor. Among the German population. There was Ernst Röhm himself. Immensely popular among his own legions of brown shirts, he wielded real power on the streets. And he openly criticized all the traditional elements of German society: businessmen, generals, and the old Prussian ruling class, the very groups on whose support Hitler relied. Röhm passionately believed that a second revolution was needed to sweep away these parasites. He enjoyed the politics of conflict not compromise. He embarked on several tours around Germany, presenting himself as a political leader and rousing the support of his men for his revolutionary vision. SA members were now required to swear an oath of loyalty to him. This was not what Hitler wanted to hear. With absolute power within his grasp, he needed to reassure the powerful traditional elements of German society. Röhm's ambitions hinted at political chaos. Within the Nazi Party, others were also dismayed at Röhm's powerful position. Hermann Göring had been favored by Hindenburg and now felt in sympathy with the more traditional army elite. To expand his own power base, Göring had taken control of the Gestapo, a civilian secret police force which was to become one of the Nazis' most feared weapons. In April 1934, Göring made Heinrich Himmler head of the Prussian Gestapo. Already chief of the SS, Himmler was ambitious for more power and saw Röhm as an obstacle. He hated the fact that the SS was still subordinate to Röhm's SA. Aided by his second-in-command, Reinhard Heydrich, Himmler began to collect complaints against the SA, including details of its leaders' scandalous sex lives. Röhm's palatial new headquarters in Munich was rumored to be a hotbed of perversion. Karl Wolff, later an SS general and Hitler's adjutant, saw how the pressure mounted.
Excesses have always happened and will always happen. What is decisive is how the leadership reacts at any given moment to stop these excesses. We in the SS always insisted that action should be taken.
Finally, the growing pressure forced Hitler to act against his old comrade. The conspiracy began.
He took only the most senior commanders into his confidence, and he wanted their assurance that his orders would be carried out. Certainly Himmler was among them, for Himmler dealt with all matters concerning security. The contingency planning was very secret. Nothing was done in writing. All preparations were verbal. One did not want to alert the SA.
On the surface, however, Himmler and Röhm were the best of friends. Both godfathers to Heydrich's first child. But Röhm's own ego and ambition steadily began to alienate him from the one person who could protect him. In private, Röhm was beginning to criticize his former friend. He's betraying all of us, he claimed. He only goes around with reactionaries. It was true. In public, Hitler wore civilian clothes and was openly subservient to Hindenburg. In February 1934, a grand dinner was held in Berlin to heal the rift between the SA and the army. A drunken Röhm declared, "Hitler is a traitor. If we can't get there with him, we'll get there without him." SA officer Victor Lutze witnessed the conversation and passed Röhm's drunken threats on to Hitler. Hindenburg and leading army generals demanded that Hitler take action against him. On the 11th of April, Hitler joined military leaders on the cruiser Deutschland. They offered him a deal, their support for his dictatorship in return for Röhm. Although Hitler could see the political sense in moving against Röhm, there were pangs of doubt. Röhm was one of his oldest comrades. On the 4th of June, Hitler had a 5-hour private discussion with Röhm. He persuaded him to take a break from his SA activities in Berlin. Hitler suggested his friend take a holiday with his top advisors at Bad Wiessee near Munich. Meanwhile, behind the political scenes, Franz von Papen, Vice-Chancellor of Germany, had decided to make a speech criticizing the Nazi regime. Hitler managed to stop the speech from being broadcast, but von Papen was still angry at Nazi excesses and threatened to resign. He also threatened to complain to Hindenburg. The old warlord, on the verge of death, could still disrupt Hitler's plans. Hitler visited him privately on the 25th of June to ease his concerns. If political violence continued, Hindenburg would have no choice but to declare martial law and let the army rule the country. The Nazi project was at a critical crossroads. Hitler had to act quickly or risk losing power. Midsummer 1934. Hitler was verging on total control over Germany. But one major obstacle remained. One of his oldest friends, Ernst Röhm. Röhm's power-hungry, erratic behavior had alienated most of the Nazi high command. Hitler knew that to stay in power, he had to act decisively against Röhm and the Brownshirts. A list of prominent SA members was drawn up and circulated among Goering, Himmler, and other conspiring Nazis. A hit list.
Those lists were mainly drawn up between Himmler and Goering. Goering had to approve all the names. Goering had been put in overall charge of the entire operation, Operation Hummingbird.
To keep up the facade of friendship, Goering attended the wedding of Karl Ernst, a senior SA figure whose name was already on the hit list. Hitler himself was still not certain what to do with Röhm. His old friend had been instrumental in his rise to power. He considered simply sacking him, but a plot by several of Röhm's leading rivals forced Hitler's hand. On a visit to Italy, fellow fascist dictator Benito Mussolini advised Hitler to act against his revolutionary left wing. On the 28th of June, Hitler attended a wedding in the Rhineland. The next day, he joined the conspirators at a hotel. That evening, Operation Hummingbird was launched. SS Gruppenführer Sepp Dietrich was ordered to take 2 SS companies to Bad Wiessee, the resort town where Röhm was on holiday. At the same time in Berlin, 1,300 members of Hitler's special SS bodyguard were made combat ready at the Berlin Cadet School of Lichterfelde. Two days later, Hitler flew to Munich. There, he was falsely informed by his closest advisors that the SA had attempted an unsuccessful putsch against time to get dressed. He was under arrest. Hitler carried on to the other rooms. All the top SA leadership was arrested. One of them was found in bed with another man. Suddenly, Hitler was repelled by the SA's homosexuality. "You pigs," he shouted, "you should be shot." As the SA men were locked in the hotel cellar, Hitler and his SS associates drove back to Munich. There, other key SA figures were rounded up and imprisoned. The first stages of the operation had gone smoothly, but the rampage had just begun. Hitler looked elsewhere for further action. With the code word Hummingbird, Goering was informed by Joseph Goebbels to proceed in Berlin. SS murder squads based at Lichterfelde went into action. Dozens of suspects were arrested, tortured, and executed in what later became known as the Night of the Long Knives. And it was not just the SA leaders who bore the brunt of Hitler's anger. Himmler's black uniformed SS were given license to attack all of Hitler's opponents, including those who'd crossed him in the distant past. Ritter von Kahr, the man who'd crushed Hitler's beer hall putsch, was found hacked to pieces in Dachau. Kurt von Schleicher, the last chancellor of the democratically elected Weimar Republic, was shot at his desk by 6 Nazi assassins, who then turned their guns on his wife. Gregor Strasser, an early rival to Hitler as leader of the Nazi Party, was tortured by the Gestapo before being executed. Karl Ernst, whose wedding Goering had attended just days earlier, was arrested on his honeymoon and put in front of a firing squad. As he faced his SS executioners, SA member Hans-Peter von Heydebreck shouted, "Long live the Führer!" But loyalty to Hitler meant nothing, as the SS pursued private vendettas under the cloak of suppressing a revolt. SA commander Engels was driven out into the forest by SS men and shot. Dozens more were hunted down and executed. Gestapo torture cells extracted meaningless confessions from those already condemned to die. There were claims of hundreds, even thousands of deaths. In reality, there were probably 85 victims. Finally, Hitler had to consider the fate of Röhm. Should he simply keep him in prison or silence him permanently? Theodor Eicke was dispatched to Röhm's cell at Stadelheim prison to carry out the Führer's orders. Eicke was the brutal commandant at Dachau, one of the concentration camps established by the brown shirts to house their opponents. Shortly before 6 p.m. on the 1st of July 1934, Eicke entered Röhm's cell. He threw down a copy of a newspaper with the headline, "Röhm Arrested." Eicke left a pistol with a single bullet on Röhm's table. 15 minutes later, with Röhm refusing to commit suicide, Eicke and a colleague re-entered the cell. Röhm was shot dead with 3 bullets. His last words were, "Mein Führer, mein Führer."